Long ago, in the far-off days of 2012, I created the Mobro Studios Top 20 Worst SpongeBob Episodes. Despite it being a two-part circus of absolute awfulness, it was a big hit. So in the following months, a massive wave of requests for a countdown of SpongeBob's best episodes came careening my way. But by 2013, I was fed up with being a Nostalgia Critic knockoff and quit the ranting scene, and out of spite snuffed out any chance of a top 10 SpongeBob episodes ever happening. So here we are, nearly 7 years after it all began. It's finally time to talk about my 10 favorite episodes of SpongeBob Squarepants. I sure hope this is worth it! Starting at number 10, we have Squidward and Clarinetland. You didn't think this list was going to be exclusively episodes from seasons 1 to 3, did you? No sir, this episode hails from season 7, around the point where I stopped following the series. I should mention that this episode was, funny enough, also number 10 on the fan-voted edition of my top 20 worst list, and even back then I liked it. So forgive me if I repeat some of the same points here. Anyway, the premise is that Squidward wants to keep his clarinet safe at work before his recital, but is forced to share a locker with SpongeBob.
Just don't touch my clarinet!
I promise nothing untoward will happen.
On its face, it doesn't seem like anything special, and the first half of this episode is a bit of a slow burner. However, they take matters in an interesting direction when SpongeBob begins renovating the locker, making Squidward increasingly paranoid. At a steady pace, it progresses to the point where Squidward finds himself in a nightmare world where his clarinet is always just out of reach.
Where are you? SpongeBob!
I am the keeper of the Horned Forest.
I'm absolutely fascinated by the bizarre nature of dreams, and I can't help but fawn over the imagery in Clarinetland. They successfully captured that bizarre nature with both creative visuals, such as this mirror room with clarinet-headed Squidwards, and through character interactions, whether the character or the interaction is strange.
And how did you get so big?
Must be all the pressure.
What are you talking about?
It must be the pressure.
They easily could have had an episode that just took place in the Krusty Krab, but would that have been as cool as meeting your wicked reflection after being eaten by a giant eagle head? I think not. Something I didn't touch on last time I talked about this episode was its use of sound. The music and ambience during the Clarinetland scenes emphasize their surrealness and add a sense of either mystery creepiness, or suspense.
I gotta get out of here!
Where are you going, you imbecile?
Humor-wise, it's not the funniest episode the show has to offer, but it has some good jokes and visual gags, this one still being my favorite.
Mr. Squidward, you're in a chipper mood this morning.
This is unacceptable. What? This?
Nice to have you back, Squidward.
I still feel Squidward's time in Clarinetland was too brief, like a lovely dream that ends too soon. They could have spent a little less time building up to Clarinetland, such as by cutting this dud of a joke.
Oops! Did I say 1018.2-E? I meant 2019.3-F.
Despite its flaws, I found this to be a rather enjoyable episode during one of the series' lowest points. Next up at number 9, Club SpongeBob. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick start their own secret club. But thanks to Squidward's arrogance, the trio ends up lost in my least favorite level from Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Oh, magic conch shell, what do we need to do to get out of the kelp forest?
Nothing.
The shell has spoken!
You know, the whole do-nothing bit is kinda brilliant. Why? Well, think about it. SpongeBob is a show that doesn't have a strict canon. No matter what happens in this episode, they'll be safe and sound at home by the next episode. So the magic conch was right all along. They really don't have to do anything to get out of the kelp forest. Normally, the main characters not doing anything would make for a boring story. In this case, it's used for comedic effect, plus we have good old Squidward to keep the story and the jokes going. For me, the funniest part of this episode was the ending, starting with this.
Could I have something to eat?
No.
Could I have something to eat?
No.
Can't you say anything else but no?
Try asking again.
Can I have something to eat?
No.
That sassiness was spot on, a perfect contrast to the Magic Conch's usual monotone voice. And then there's this.
With these two barnacle heads and their magic conch shell.
Magic conch shell?
You mean like this?
The magic conch!
Indeed, Squidward. Who saw that coming? Overall, it's the solid humor of this episode that makes it one of my favorites. Coming in at number 8, Ripped Pants, one of the earliest episodes in the series. While hanging out at Goo Lagoon, SpongeBob and Sandy are approached by Larry the Lobster, who invites them to go weightlifting. When SpongeBob tries to impress the crowd, he accidentally rips his pants, making him the laughingstock of the beach. What's interesting about this episode is that it shows us a side of SpongeBob we don't typically see, at least during the pre-film era anyway, his jealous side. All he wants is to have some fun with his best friend, but gets stuck as a third wheel at an activity that's totally out of his element. Who wouldn't be frustrated in such a situation? This flaw not only rounds out SpongeBob's character, but gives him room to grow as one. It's what drives the story forward. To garner attention, he starts ripping his pants on purpose, which eventually wears thin and ultimately backfires.
I need a tailor. Because I rip my pants! Ah!
That wasn't funny, SpongeBob. Y'all had me worried sick.
On the contrary, the dramatic build-up to the heavenly lights just flicking off like a light bulb was pretty funny. Once SpongeBob realizes that being a fool wasn't the way to go, we enter into the concluding show tune.
I thought that I had everybody on my side, but I went and blew it, all sky high. And now she won't even spare a passing glance. All just because I ripped my pants.
It's a soulful ballad that's strong musically and lyrically. The music sports a catchy beat with a smooth guitar riff, while the lyrics really feel like they're being sung from the heart, as they reflect SpongeBob's growth as a character. It begins with him recognizing his folly and ends with him giving a simple, enduring message.
Be true to yourself, don't miss your chance, and you won't end up like the fool who ripped his pants.
That's right, kids. Don't be an idiot just to get attention. It isn't worth it. So for its meaningful story, on-the-ball humor, and memorable show tune, Ripped Pants is one of my favorite episodes. Next up at number 7, Squeaky Boots. In this episode, Mr. Krabs gets his daughter Pearl a pair of fishing boots as a birthday gift, which doesn't end well.
But I got him for a bargain!
So to get rid of them, he tricks SpongeBob into thinking they're a special pair of fry cooking boots. This also proves to be a bad idea, as the squeakiness of the boots takes its toll on Krabs' sanity. It's a silly story that offers some good laughs, like this scene of Mr. Krabs fighting with his squeaky bedroom window. From a comedy standpoint, it's some decent slapstick, and from a story standpoint, it foreshadows the effect the boots will have on Mr. Krabs. Without a doubt, my favorite part of this episode is the climax, where Mr. Krabs' guilt over stealing the boots back from SpongeBob drives him into a fit of hysteria.
I didn't write that!
The visuals are fun to watch and develop a creepy, yet humorous atmosphere. The one thing that distracts during this sequence is some obviously recycled animation.
Stop it! Don't you hear it?
I love Mr. Krabs' expressions here. Coupled with the blank reaction from the customers, it makes for quite a funny scene. Even better is when he starts referencing Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Telltale Heart.
I took the boots! They're here! Under the floorboard! Oh, please, make it stop! It's a squeaking of the hideous boots!
All this over a pair of fishing boots. And I'm not sure what I love more, the fact that Mr. Krabs' solution to the boot problem is to eat them, or SpongeBob's priceless reaction.
Why did you eat my boots, Mr. Krabs?
Because, lad, you didn't need them. It's not the boots, it's the bootee. I mean the person in the boots.
Like SpongeBob in Ripped Pants, Mr. Krabs feels like a three-dimensional character in this episode. He has people he cares about, but his cheapness lands him in trouble with them. In the end, though, he makes up for his mistakes. If this episode had some more laugh-out-loud level jokes, I'd have ranked it higher. But as it is, it's still one of my favorite episodes. Halfway up the list at number 6, we have Krusty Krab training video. This was a clever and rather unconventional episode. It's formatted like a training video for future employees of the Krusty Krab, complete with corny graphics and a charismatic narrator.
Sounds like a lot of hoopla to make over a little Krabby Patty, right?
Wrong!
Since it doesn't follow a traditional narrative, the episode is driven by humor. And let me tell you, they nailed it. Whether it's a simple toilet joke or subtle visual gag, there's laughs to be had all throughout. For instance, who could forget this?
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
This is like the opening scene in Spaceballs. It drags on for an unexpectedly long time, but without overstaying its welcome. And the narrator doing an improvised soundtrack with his voice makes it even sillier. Other scenes play on the fact that the episode's formatted like a training video.
Customers are what keeps the Krusty Krab strong and alive.
Squidward, your ceiling is talking to me!
What I love about the scenes in this episode is how they're constructed. Let's take a look at this one.
We have to make sure you're ready for the psychological aspect of the job. Interfacing with your boss.
Mr. Krabs, can I have a raise?
No.
Good job, Mr. Squarepants.
Can I make a Krabby Patty now?
And now we move from behind the scenes.
It opens with a solid gag, delivers a punchline, then follows up with SpongeBob being well cut off. The latter works even better since it's a running gag that SpongeBob keeps begging to make a Krabby Patty. Many scenes in the episode are like this. They compound jokes to make the scenes funnier. So much so that it's earned a spot as one of my favorite episodes. Alrighty, next up at number 5, we have F.U.N. The premise here is that SpongeBob, after thwarting another of Plankton's plans, decides to try and make friends with him.
I bet if he had just one friend, he wouldn't be such a meanie.
The story is as charming as it is funny. SpongeBob's trademark earnestness and Plankton's villainy create an interesting dynamic, one that allows for character development and all kinds of jokes.
Haven't you degraded me enough for one day?
No, I want you to come out and play with me.
And how about that show tune?
Let me spell it for you. F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all.
Down here in the deep blue sea.
The fun song is a short and sweet tune that's actually pretty catchy. Unlike something like the Best Day Ever song, which just gets annoying, this show tune is fun to sing along to and marks the point in the story where Plankton seems to change. Oh, and Plankton's rendition of this song is hilariously morbid.
F is for fire that burns down the whole town, used for uranium bombs. N is for no survivors when you're...
Plankton!
Anyway, when Mr. Krabs tries proving to SpongeBob that he's being deceived by Plankton, the climax kicks in. When I was a kid, I actually found this scene kind of emotional. Now, as an adult, I find it more humorous than anything. Part of what makes it funny is how straight they play it.
What is it then? Tell me what you see here!
I don't see anything.
How can you not see it?
The dramatic soundtrack and the dialogue make it sound like something out of a soap opera. And it all leads up to a nice punchline.
But then you showed me friendship. And now I realize that's all I ever really wanted.
Really?
No, not really. Being evil is too much fun.
It's delightful, it's funny, it's one of my favorite episodes of the show. Next in line at number 4, we have Midlife Crustacean. This is an episode I definitely appreciate more as an adult than when I was a kid. The premise is that Mr. Krabs begins going through a midlife crisis and wants to feel young again. So he decides to tag along with SpongeBob and Patrick on their big night out. Unfortunately for Krabs, his idea of cool doesn't exactly sync up with theirs.
Let's party! Any party next door? Wait a minute. This is a laundromat.
It's another consistently funny episode that sports an interesting story. There are so many good gags in here that there's no way I could cover them all in one sitting. Some are subtle, like this play on words.
Are you ready to go crazy?
I'm already hearing voices!
And others are more overt, like this.
No cutting! You gotta wait your turn like everybody else!
No! No!
I've seemed to be attached to the climaxes of some of these episodes, and this one is no exception. When Patrick draws in Mr. Krabs with the promise of a panty raid, the three slip into a house to find some. Whose house is the kicker?
You finally came through for me, boys! I feel young again!
Eugene?
Mother?
What are you doing with my bloomers?
Simply amazing. This works in terms of the story too, as Mr. Krabs gets punished only for doing something as sleazy as trying to steal a girl's underwear, rather than being punished for just trying to feel young again. Midlife Crustacean, you're on the top list. Coming up at number 3, Idiot Box. I'll let Squidward sum this episode up.
You two ordered a giant screen television just so you could play in the box.
Pretty smart, huh?
I thought it wouldn't work.
Okay, there's a bit more to it. Squidward begins hearing impossible sounds coming from the box, so he tries to figure out what they are. What makes this episode special to me is that they managed to make Squidward reacting to a motionless cardboard box hilarious. Let's have a look at this scene, which I honestly find to be one of the funniest scenes in the history of this show.
SpongeBob?
Oh, man!
Hang in there, buddy. The chopper's on the way.
SpongeBob, my legs are frozen solid. You'll have to cut them off with a saw.
No, Patrick, I can't do that.
Why not?
Because I already cut off my own arms.
No!
What the?
I don't know what's funniest about this scene. The utterly dark direction Sponge and Pat's imaginary mountain climbing takes? Squidward honestly thinking that an avalanche happened inside a cardboard box? Or Squidward opening the box to find them just sitting there? It all coalesces into one beautifully crafted joke. The rest of the humor is on point as well, so it's not like one scene carries the whole episode.
Isn't there anything on that isn't about boxes?
And welcome back to Championship Boxing.
I guess this is okay. I mean, it's not really about boxes. I give up.
This episode is among the funniest the show has to offer, making it one of my absolute favorites. Next up at number 2, Chocolate with Nuts. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to become chocolate bar salesmen after reading a magazine about fancy living. Story-wise, this episode is a really fun watch. SpongeBob and Patrick's attempts to sell chocolate keep taking progressively strange turns, from a guy chasing them down while screaming chocolate, to a guy appearing in 2 houses at once to con them.
That's no way to carry your merchandise. No, wrong.
Humor-wise, this episode is a steady stream of mirth, including a number of classic moments. For instance, who could forget this gem?
Flatter the customer. Make him feel good.
Hello?
I love you.
Or perhaps this scene, with its hints of dark humor.
You rub it on your skin, and it makes you live forever. No.
Live forever, you say? I'll take one.
There's just one thing about this episode that bothers me. This joke.
We need a new approach, a new tactic.
I got it. Let's get naked.
No, let's save that for when we're selling real estate.
Does anyone here get that? Is it supposed to be random, or is there a deeper meaning? If there is, I'm having trouble seeing it. Once again, it's the top-notch humor that leads this episode to the top of the list. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Soaring in at number 1, we have Band Geeks, coming as a surprise to absolutely no one. God, back in the day, I remember watching this episode over and over on my Video Now player. Anyone here remember those? This episode is often hailed as one of, if not the best episode in the series. But what about it makes it so special? Well, if you ask me, it's an exquisite blend of humor and character. The plot is simple. Squidward sets out to start a marching band after getting a condescending call from his snooty rival, Squilliam Fancyson.
And we're supposed to play the Bubble Bowl next week. That's right. I'm living your dreams, Squidward.
If this episode was to work, they had to get us to root for Squidward, and they succeed by introducing us to Squilliam. As much of a grump Squidward is, we can sympathize with him here. He had dreams and goals just like any of us, but just didn't succeed. And then, in comes not only some jackass to rub his failures in his face, but also an opportunity to make his dream come true. We want him to pull through in the end. So he brings practically the entire town together to form the Bikini Bottom Super Band, and hilarity ensues.
Good. Now the wind. And the drums. Too bad that didn't kill me.
The jokes have plenty of variety, this being among my favorite moments.
What kind of monsters are we? That poor creature came to us in his hour of need, and we failed him. Squidward's always been there for us when it was convenient for him.
You see, subtle little moments like that can be very effective given the right conditions. The scene here is being played seriously, then in comes a line that suddenly flips the mood on its head. Other times, though, being big and loud can also be funny.
So if we play loud, people might think we're good. Everybody ready? And a 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, 3, 4.
In the end, we're treated to an epic musical climax as the BBSB performs. And seriously, who saw this coming? And so, Squidward's dream comes true with the help of the rest of Bikini Bottom. The end. And that concludes my top 10 SpongeBob episodes. Thanks for watching.